we are celebrating heroes, remembering forgotten veterans and paying tribute to the people who fought so hard to win our freedom.
This is how the people remember. All this week I'm exploring some of the treasures here. On today's programme, Forgotten Heroes. Hello from the Imperial War Museum, Duxford. Today we're paying tribute to forgotten heroes of conflict.
After war ended in Europe, the battles in the Far East raged on, claiming thousands more lives. It is often regarded as the forgotten war, overlooked by a home country celebrating victory in Europe.
It wasn't until 3 months after VE Day that the war in the Far East finally came to an end, halting one of the worst episodes in British military history. During that period, tens of thousands of servicemen experienced the brutalities of prisoner of war camps.
Today we are joined by Duncan Ballantyne, whose father was one of those prisoners. Duncan, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah.
Now, your dad was in one of the regiments that was captured by the Japanese.
He was, yes. He was captured when the boat he was on going to war was actually sunk. He told me that many of his friends drowned. He was picked up by a Japanese boat, so taken straight to a prison war camp.
And he only survived because he was such a good swimmer.
That's right, yeah. And you know, that's the great thing. One of the things he did when he came out after the war, he made his mind up he was going to teach all of his children to swim. So he taught us all, before we could walk practically, he taught us all to swim. So it was great, so I love swimming. I've done the same thing with my children, my grandchildren now. They're all good swimmers. You know, so.
How much did he talk about it? I mean, he died 30 years ago, didn't he?
Yeah, almost 30 years ago. He talked about it very little. But I know that when the war ended, he was one of what was called the living dead. They were like skeletons walking around. And he was very lucky to survive. But there was occasionally, when we'd go out and have a drink together, he'd talk about something. And I remember one day he got just a little bit animated when he told us about the day they'd found a rat. And they managed to catch this rat in the camp to cook it and eat it. And he told us extensively how much they enjoyed eating it because they were starving.
They had so little food.
Yeah.
But it was such a traumatic period. Did he ever talk to you in detail about that or not? Did you ever see, you know, for yourself what he'd gone through when he spoke about it? No,
he told me quite often about some of the illnesses that some of the people suffered, and it made you swell up sometimes when you were starving. But he never actually get into detail about how he suffered, and I don't think it's normal for a prisoner of war to do that.
It really doesn't bear thinking about. We'll talk plenty more about your father later on.
Now, while the war was being fought in the Far East, Bomber Command was fighting in the skies over Europe. They faced the deadliest odds. It's a staggering figure, but more than 55,000 airmen from Bomber Command were killed in service.
During the war, the men of Bomber Command were regarded as heroes, but after that, many of them felt their contribution to war went largely unrecognised. This is one veteran's story. Frank will be given a very special tour of a brand new memorial for all those who served and were killed in Bomber Command.
Now, Duncan, your dad worked on the Thai-Burma Railway, which was notoriously known as the Death Railway.
Yeah.
That must have been a horrendous experience.
Yeah, it must have been terrible. And so, you know, so many people died there. You know, it was just difficult. I think surviving was what they did. It was the only thing they could do, was survive or die. The most extensive conversation I had with him was after my sister's funeral. And he started to tell me about how one of the jobs he had in a prison war camp before it became really thin was to put the bodies on the fire. They'd open a fire about once a month and they'd burn the bodies. It was really upsetting for him to talk about that. So I think the reason a lot of prisoners of war don't talk about it is because it's so upsetting for them to do so.
He got moved around a lot, didn't he?
He did, yes. For some reason he was taken to, I think it's called Formosa, and taken to Japan and taken to a prison war camp there and just spent the rest of his war years there.
I've got a couple of documents I don't think you've seen yet, but so let's have a look at one of these. This is his liberation questionnaire. So this is what he filled in on liberation, and you can see there. I'm sure you can recognise his handwriting. It's his own writing there, I think.
Is that your dad's handwriting?
I would think it is, yeah. It's very similar to mine.
And you can see here, so it lists the camps.
Kuala Lumpur.
There, Kuala Lumpur, and then Thailand, and the dates he was taken there.
Yeah.
The date he was first captured, actually.
When he was first
26th
captured,
of
where
February,
he was.
42.
42. Yeah.
And then his regiment is, I think you know, the Argyll and Southern Highlanders up there.
Well, that's Formosa, and then Japan.
Yeah.
Formosa, Japan, Manila, Thailand. Wow, 3 different camp leaders. Yeah.
And then we also have this. There you are. This is his prisoner of war index card, filled in by the Japanese. There's his name, William Bannatyne.
Yeah.
Date of birth, which they got wrong to begin with. His battalion. And then obviously his address and everything. And then this is really interesting. We had this translated here. So his occupation, and he lists as a farmer. That's what it says.
Was he ever a farmer before the war?
Not to my knowledge. Maybe he did that for a reason. Maybe,
Yes, maybe he did.
maybe there's a rumour if you see you're a farmer, you get out in the fields or something.
Yeah. And the address there, is that address you recognise?
Yes, Cabot Road, Clydebank. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think that was the pub.
It's amazing, though, isn't it, to see these documents from the past?
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, unbelievable.
Well, thank you for now. We'll talk more about it later on.
The war in the Far East ended when the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this is the 70th anniversary of VJ Day.
The occasion was marked by a service attended by the Queen and a march past at the Cenotaph in London. Many Far East veterans attended the event, and as part of the BBC coverage, 2 of them told their stories. Some really harrowing stories there.
Amazing listening to those men, because I don't know how old they are, but my father would be 100 if he was still alive. And he told us as well about just living day by day. That gentleman just said it. His way of winning was to live. Every day that he woke up and lived another day, he'd beaten the Japanese. And that's what my father felt. You know, he felt all the time.
He was in Pudu prison in Malaya for some time, and we've come across this extraordinary... This is a piece of paper, but it's actually a piece of toilet roll.
Uh-huh.
And it was typed up by an officer in Pudu prison. I mean, you can see, I'm not going to get it out because it's the original, it's so delicate. And on it are the names, because obviously so many of these men were missing. Nobody knew what had happened to them. So during the retreat down the peninsula, what they did here in the prison, they gathered the names of all the officers they could, the people who'd been killed, the people who were injured, the people who were being held.
Yep.
And they got this was smuggled out of the prison. And if you look here, right there is your father.
Wow.
It's so incredible. But it was typed up by a British officer, smuggled out of the prison, and they were given instructions on the toilet roll that it was to be taken. They took it down to Changi,
Right.
by somebody who was passing through with the Japanese army, smuggled it out, and they were told to unroll the toilet roll very carefully, and at the bottom of it they found that.
Amazing, amazing.
Isn't that beautiful?
Isn't it just,
It's extraordinary.
And the experiences your dad had in the PW camps was terrible.
Yeah.
How did that affect his life back home?
You know, what I think is absolutely amazing is that what my father told me, that his way of winning, like living every day, was when he was released, he was determined that he was going to get fit again, put weight back on, meet a woman, get married, have a family, get a job, have a family. And 4 years after liberation, I was born, second child. So he'd done all that in 4 years, met my mother, married her. My sister was born in May, and they had a house and a job. He worked in Singapore machine factory, big factory in Clydebank, and he worked there until his retirement.
Do you wish that you had been able to talk to your father more about it?
Yeah, I'd love to talk to him now about it. It'd be fantastic, yes. And I wish I had done, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your memories of your father with us today.
Thank you.
Later on today's programme. And we wish Rick all the best of luck with his goal of walking to the Cenotaph to pay his respects.
We're joined now by Jan Brass, who was also a prisoner of war, and he worked on the death railways just like Duncan's father. Jan, what was it like being a prisoner of war in the Far East?
In the beginning, we stayed a long time in Thailand, in Bampong, which is near the River Kwai, but we were treated quite reasonably. We had good food, and work was not heavy. It was after that the trouble started, when they started building the railway.
And when the railway was complete, you were moved on to other work, weren't you?
We moved to Japan because they had other work for us in the coal mines in Japan. I'll tell you a story. I was beaten in Japan because I didn't salute the guard, which was my fault. You had to leave the barracks, and if you left the barrack, you had to shout "Kere" and bow to the guard, so that they knew that there was somebody in the camp loose. And I did not shout "Kere" because I was carrying 2 buckets of hot water. Well, I was beaten up there as I have never beaten up in my life before. And it was much worse, in my estimation, than the railway, because the railway meant that you were still in the open air. You could see the sky, you could feel the wind. In the mine, it was dark and it was very gloomy, and the work was very dangerous. I lost my best friend there. The roof fell down on him.
And how did you get to Japan?
By ship. We were put into the deeps of the hole, and we were terrified because the Americans were very often torpedoing ships that they saw, and they didn't bother whether they really did not know that we were on board or not.
And this is what happened to your father, isn't it? Because his ship was hit.
That's right, yeah, he was on the upper deck. The ship was hit and he survived.
Do you feel that you can forgive the Japanese for the way you were treated?
Well, I still hate the Japanese, so and really, really bad.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of people have gone back to Japan to sort of be friendly, to befriend them. And I have never felt that urgency.
Those experiences in the mines and on the railways under these brutal regimes, it must change how you look at life.
Yes, it was a strange thing. When I was still at the railway, I was very religious. I had a book, a religious book, and I looked at it, and I really felt religious. But I've long since departed from that.
Incredible, hearing your stories. I mean, does it shed light, Duncan, for you any more on the sort of thing your father must have?
Yes, it does a bit, yeah. I remember my father telling me about the salute and friends he had who were actually beaten quite extensively because they didn't salute or refused to salute.
He couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Jan, thank you so much for coming to talk to us. I mean, such harrowing stories, but incredible to hear them from you. And thank you for coming as well to meet Duncan and talk to him.
Thank you.
Now, earlier we heard from a veteran who wants to make sure the achievements of Bomber Command aren't forgotten. So we took him to see the new memorial to Bomber Command in Lincolnshire, which is taking shape. The pipes and drums of the 2nd Battalion Royal Gurkha Rifles. Well, that's it for today's programme. Duncan, thank you so much for coming in and telling us all about your father.
Very welcome.
From all of us here at the Imperial War Museum in Duxford, goodbye.
Goodbye.